we are going to talk about Generation Z, your soon to be colleagues, clients, and customers. And the first thing I want to do is give you a description of what Gen Z is. So if you take a look at your screen, you will see five different generations listed on the screen. And just let me give a little bit of information about how we come up with the dates for each of the generations. Now, different experts, different books, different videos, whatever you watch, are going to give you different years for each of the generations. What I've tried to do is kind of go in the middle of each one of those and give you the best middle ground for each of those generations. That's why on your screen, it says that you are seeing the approximate birth years here. So for Gen Z, as Nikki said, at 95 to 2014, 1997 to 2014, somewhere there in that middle is what we're looking at. Now, the percentages that you see on your screen are the world population percentages. And we have to keep in mind that every part of the world could be a little bit different. Now, in the United States, our United States population mirrors what you see as the world population numbers here. In Europe, however, that is not the case. In Europe, in the European Union, the millennials are the minority population. And the boomers actually are the majority population. Also, what we find in Europe is there are more boomers who are staying in the workforce longer. They are working much longer than conversely boomers are in the United States. So in Europe, we see boomers as the majority population, and we see more boomers staying in the workplace. Whereas in the United States, as you can see, millennials and Gen Zs are the majority population. And here's an interesting statistic. By January of 2022, in the United States, 50% of the workforce will be Generation Y or millennials. 25% will be Generation Z or iGens. What that means is that by January of next year, 75% of the US workforce will be under the age of 41. So very different depending on what area of the world we're in. A couple of other things to keep in mind is by January of 2022, the Gen Zs will outnumber the millennials in 48 out of 50 nations around the world. But Gen Z and Gen Y, millennials, and what we are now calling iGens, are going to be the majority dominant population in the world's four largest economies, which of course are China, the US, Japan, and Germany. And that will continue for a while. Now, one other caveat on these numbers, we could see a little bit of a change next year as the population numbers as a result of COVID start coming out. Those numbers are not out yet. They have not been solidified by the experts yet. So maybe by this time next year, we'll see a little bit of change in these numbers. But for right now, this is what we're going with. We're going to talk specifically today about Generation Z or iGens. Now, when you look at iGens, when you look at that name and you think about why in the world is that what we're calling them, I think this picture is a good indicator as to why we're calling them iGens. This is the first generation that has not known a world without the internet. Everything they do is internet based. And let's get some terminology started here. This is no longer a cell phone. This is now a smart device. And so that's what we need to start calling it, as a smart device. And the reason it is a smart device is because you can do everything on it. It is smart enough to live your entire life on. And that's what the iGens do, is they live their entire life on their smart device. So let's get into some detailed information about this generation so that as they are starting to come into your workplace, you'll understand who it is you're working with. And as they're starting to come in as your customers and clients, you will better understand how you can serve them as your customers and clients. Majority of the information today comes from this book that you see on your screen by Jean Twenge. It's iGens, Why Today's Super Connected Kids Are Growing Up Less Rebellious, more tolerant, less happy, and completely unprepared for adulthood and what that means for the rest of us. Now, if you pick this book up and take a read, you will notice that there is one main theme that goes throughout this book and pretty much describes the iGens to a T, and that is safety. Their number one priority in everything they do is safety. So let me give you a little bit of a description of what I mean by that. iGens are they have grown up as a safety generation, and as they are coming into the workplace, they are looking for that same type of safety. They are looking for safety in their environment. They are looking for safety in the people that they are with. They are looking for safety in their own health and mental health. And they have grown up again in an environment where safety has been the number one issue. I don't want you to equate their need for safety as fear, though. It's not fear. They are not a fearful generation. They just are a cautious generation. So this generation tends to think before they act, think before they speak, think before they go somewhere strange or do something that is out of their normal routine. They are very routine oriented, and that is because they have been taught to be routine oriented. Let's think about some of the influences that this generation has had. So, this generation has grown up in a time where terrorism is real. Terrorism is on their soil. They have domestic terrorism as well as international terrorism. They've grown up with this understanding that terrorism is real and it could happen on their own soil at any point. Keep in mind, too, this is also a generation that has grown up with public violence and school shootings or school violence. So they have grown up understanding that in any public venue that they're in, that they could be attacked at any time. I know this sounds rather sad, but it's reality. This generation has grown up in schools that go through not only weather drills like tornadoes, hurricane drills, those types of things, typhoon drills, earthquake drills. But this is a generation that has also grown up in school where they have gone through active shooter drills. And they have had to learn what to do if an active shooter comes into their school. They have grown up with parents who explain that if you are out in public and you hear something that sounds like a gunshot, you take cover. So they believe that if they go to the mall or they go to an outdoor cafe or a park, that at any point they could be a victim of violence. This generation has grown up with that expectation that at any point they could be killed. This generation has also grown up seeing a global recession and a housing bust a few years ago. Now, this happened all over the world where we had a recession, and many people lost things that were important to them, especially their homes. And this generation, although they may have been very young at the time, they watched their parents suffer through that. And that has been an influence on them as well. I'm going to explain that in a little more detail in a few minutes. They also have their smart device as an influence. Again, the smart device is something that they can do everything on. They can live their entire life on that smart device. They can go to school. They can get their medical attention, their mental health attention. They can meet friends. They can date over their smart device. They can do research. They can do anything, shop. So that is a big influence for this generation. A couple of more important influences before we move on is this generation also, many of them have older siblings that are in the millennial generation. And they watched their millennial siblings who were shepherded into adulthood by their parents, who were, as a generation, millennials were taught you could be anything you want to be, you could do anything you want to do, you can go anywhere you want to go. And unfortunately, millennials, when they reached the workplace, found out that that wasn't exactly true. It was a little bit of a harsh reality. And the iGens have watched that in their millennial brothers and sisters, and they've decided that they don't want to walk quite that same path. Again, I'll give you a little bit more detail on that in just a few minutes. And then the last influence that the iGens have had has been an understanding that bullying, especially cyberbullying, because they do live on their smart device at all times. But bullying and intolerance are not things that they're willing to agree with or accept. And so, as a generation, we are seeing them stand up against bullying and intolerance. And really, they will be a generation that walks us forward in that respect. And that's wonderful. Now, what I want to tell you is as I go forward, I'm going to be speaking in generalities about iGens. So you may have children or grandchildren who are iGens, and you may think to yourself, oh, no, Christy, that does not apply to my children at all. What I want you to do is keep a couple of things in mind. Is first, I'm giving you generalities. So not every single thing I say is going to apply to every person who's ages 7 to 24. Also, if you are using your own children or grandchildren, nieces or nephews, that's what's going through your mind as I'm talking. Keep in mind that your own children act very differently when they are away from you than when they are with you. So, what you may see on a daily basis in your own child, they may have very different behavior when they're out and about, when they're at school, when they're with their friends, at a friend's house, that type of thing. So, we need to make sure that we keep that in mind. One other thing to keep in mind too is the information that I'm giving you is very timely, but Generation Z has been the most highly affected generation by COVID. They are in a mental health crisis, and it is due to the COVID and how they had to be even more isolated than normal. So again, by next year, I think we'll see a little bit different information coming out about this generation as a result of COVID. But for right now, we'll go with what we have. So what Jean did in her book is she took the iGen name and she made a little play on the I, and she came up with 10 I words to help us remember a little bit about the characteristics of the iGen. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through these 10 I words, and I'm going to give you some details about each one. So the first one we're going to start with, we're actually going to combine the first two together, and they are in no hurry and indefinite. So what this means is that in general, iGens are in no hurry to do the things that most of us do at particular ages. And indefinite figures into that too. What that means is that they are indefinite to falling into a category of you do things at certain ages. They're just indefinite to that. iGens are very independent, and they're going to do things when they feel like they should do them. Again, I want you to keep in mind that caution and that safety. They're going to do things when they feel that they are safe to do, that they are ready to do them. So let me give you a few examples of the things I'm talking about here. iGens are probably going to drive at a little bit later age than what the previous generations have. So let me give you an example. So for instance, here in the United States, for the most part, you get your driver's license, your learner's permit when you're 15 years old. Previous generations, all the way through millennials, when you were getting close to being 15 years old, you would have your mom make an appointment for the driver's license office so that you could go down, you could get your learner's permit. And man, when you turned 16 years old on the day of your birthday, you were in there getting your driver's permit, your permanent driver's license. Well, iGens don't quite think like that. They are postponing getting their driver's license, many of them, because they don't feel comfortable driving. So let's go back to that idea of safety and caution. They're thinking to themselves, well, I'm afraid if I drive a car and I have an accident, I could hurt myself or I could hurt someone else. I'm afraid if I drive a car and I have an accident, then my insurance rates could go up. It could cost my parents money to have to pay for that car. And so because they have these hesitations, they would just rather not drive. And keep in mind, they have other options now that previous generations didn't have. They can use the smartphone to call Uber, and they can or they could do rideshare, or they have friends that are older that have their driver's license that will drive them around, or parents that will still drive them around. So driving is one of those things that we're going to see them be in no hurry and quite indefinite about. I'll get my driver's license when it suits me. The next one you see here on your screen is sex. We are finding that iGens are engaging in sexual activity for the first time at a later age than what previous generations have, and certainly different than what their millennial brothers and sisters did. So we are seeing them engage in that initial sexual activity at a much later age again because of caution, because of safety. If I have sex, I could get a sexually transmitted disease. If I have sex, I could get pregnant and I'm not ready to raise a family. So I'm not going to do that yet. Are you starting to see that theme now come about? Alcohol and drugs. This is an interesting one to me. We are starting to see iGens engage in alcohol at a later age and illegal drugs at a later age. Now, we do have more iGens that are on prescription medications right now because of the mental health crisis. But as far as illegal drugs and alcohol, we are seeing them engage at later ages as well. Again, keep in mind, if I drink and I drive, I could hurt someone. If I take drugs and I'm acting crazy and my friend takes my picture and puts it on social media, that could embarrass me. It could embarrass my family. And so they don't do it. Marriage and kids, we're going to see this postponed as well. Millennials started this one. We see many millennials who get up into their late 20s or even into their 30s before they think about marriage and having children. Generation Z is going to continue that trend as well. They are going to get married and have children at much later ages. The generation that will come after Gen Z will be a much smaller generation in numbers because of that. And then work is the last one that you see on the slide here. They are going to be a little bit later in going to work. Many times in previous generations, as soon as we got to the age where we could work, we would get out and get a job. We were so excited to have that extra spending money. But Gen Zs are not doing that. They're waiting a little bit longer because what if I get to a job and I don't know how to do it? What if I commit to a job and I can't get a ride? And so again, that caution is holding them back. What we need to think about here is as we are raising Gen Zs, as we are mentoring to them, and certainly as they are starting to come into our workplace, is when we see them step back and not want to take that step forward, not be in a hurry to do something, when we see them being a little indefinite, is let's try to make them as comfortable as we can. Let's give them the knowledge that they need and the confidence that they need to step forward and do that thing that they're hesitant to do. Once they get started, once they feel comfortable doing something, they jump in and they're amazing. But we just have to help them get over that hump where they do feel that comfort level. Now, the next I word on Jean's list is internet. Again, this is a generation that has grown up from day one with the internet. It's all they've known. And they can do everything via the internet, get advice, get information, go to school, see their friends. We all know it. Every single thing is done via the internet. Malls and shopping stores have seen a huge decline in attendance, not just because of COVID, but because this generation shops online. Also, they don't like going to the malls because they're scared. There could be violence against them at the mall. So they're doing their shopping online. But everything is internet related. Now, this is important as they're starting to come into our workplace because those of us who are used to doing things where we do research the old-fashioned way, or maybe we take out a pen and paper and we write things, or we do a strategic planning session where we put big pieces of paper on the wall and we write things out. We're going to need to understand that this generation does all of that right here. And they're doing all of it on an internet-based program. So as employers, we need to make sure that we are staying ahead of the curve on technology and the internet, and that we are allowing the internet to be used in just about everything that's going on in our work environment. The next two I words are in person no more and insulated but not intrinsic. So again, safety and caution being that theme, we see fewer iGens meeting in person because they are concerned. They're concerned about their safety. They're concerned about being uncomfortable in a particular situation. And if you can communicate with people on your smart device, you can date on your smart device, which is a little bit more at ease, a little bit more comfortable, and you don't have to worry about things, about people hurting you in any way. Why not do it? So that's what they are doing. But in person no more means that they are also isolating themselves. And we're going to help them understand that you have to get out of that isolation. Here are some of the things that we're going to see as a result of in person no more and insulated but not intrinsic. We expect to see lower crime rates. Now, right now, violent crimes are the violent crime rate is not lower across the world. However, we do expect as we see more Gen Zs coming up, because keep in mind, the youngest ones in this group are still age 7. As we see them coming up more, we are going to see crime rates lower. The reason for this is if they are not together with people, then crimes cannot be committed. So police are expecting to see fewer sexual assaults, fewer actual physical assaults on people, fewer shootings, fewer murders, deaths, etc. So we do expect to see a lower crime rate. We are expecting to see a lot of failed relationships. So when Gen Z does have to come out of that isolation and they have to go into the workplace and they have to form relationships with people, it's going to be very difficult for them because they're not going to have that skill. That's one of the things that we really need to help them with as they come into the workplace is how to form those relationships, how to communicate. You see the next thing there on your screen is they're going to have a lack of good communication skills. These are the things that we really need to be ready to teach them. We also need to keep this in mind as we are starting to serve clients and customers who are in this age range. As we're serving our clients and customers, we need to remember that they're not going to have the communication skills to tell us what they need. It's going to be a little bit harder to serve them appropriately, to provide excellent customer service if we can't understand what their needs are. So we're going to have to be very patient and we're going to have to help them along with that communication. Now, the last thing that it says on here is we are probably going to see a decline in civic involvement. I hate to say that, but if iGens are not getting out and they are not going places where they could be involved in civic activities or community service projects, we are going to see a decline. Gen Zs are going to continue to participate in those things by giving money over their smart device or by participating in group activities over their smart device, but we're probably going to see a decline in in-person civic involvement. Now, keep in mind, I've already said we're going to see failed relationships. We're going to see a lack of communication skills. One other thing that is going to be a result of this is that mental health crisis is increasing every single day. That isolation is causing a higher mental health crisis. And so that is something else that we're really going to have to be on the lookout for and make sure that we are prepared to handle, especially as they are coming into our workplaces. Now, the next I on our list is insecure. Now, this covers a myriad of things. First of all, iGens tend to be a little bit more insecure in themselves, in their confidence level. And so that's one thing we need to help them work on. But insecurity here also means very insecure in their environment. As I was explaining, one of the influences for this generation is the random public violence that has been going on for the past few years. School shootings, people driving semi trucks through down a busy street and through cafes, that type of thing. And so iGens are quite insecure in their environment and their surroundings. In schools today, many schools around the world, the schools are providing places or rooms that are called safe spaces. If you've not heard of this, I encourage you to Google it and take a look. But most schools are now providing safe spaces. So your children are growing up in environments where from a very early age, all the way up through high school, now into colleges, they have safe spaces. These safe spaces serve a couple of purposes. One is certainly if there is an active shooter situation, you can go to a safe space and perhaps it has a metal door or something of that nature where you could be protected. But safe spaces are also for mental health crisis. So let's say perhaps a student has a situation where they're being bullied and they're not sure how to handle it. They can go to the safe space where there is maybe a counselor or a teacher or a nurse. Maybe there's a peer counselor, maybe one of their own peers in the school. In high schools, especially, we see peer counseling where they can go in this safe space and they can talk out what is happening to them and how they want to deal with it. So rather than just cowering down to the bullying or standing up and ending up in a fight, they can go to this safe space and they can learn to control themselves and control the environment better. And then they can also escape that bullying and not fall prey to it again. This idea of safe spaces has now made its way into many work environments. Google, Amazon, Apple, they're all using safe spaces at their work environments now as well. These are quiet rooms where people can go, they can use that time to calm themselves down, they can think without interruption. EAP programs, employee assistance programs, are also being used for this purpose to help people who feel like they are in some kind of mental health crisis to get the assistance that they need so that they can go back and continue working. So if your work environment is not including safe spaces, I highly encourage you to work with your human resources departments to think about how you can incorporate safe spaces into your work environment. This is going to be one of the things that iGens actually ask for when they do interviews. They're going to ask, do you have safe spaces at your work environment? The next I phrase that Jean uses is income insecurity. This generation is not income insecure. This generation, many of you who have children who are iGens, you may find that they have bank accounts that are higher than your savings bank account. It's amazing. They are definitely savers rather than spenders. They do not want income insecurity at all. They want jobs that they can get into, that they can work their way up, that they can have benefits for, that they can learn new things. But unlike millennials who do tend to change jobs about every 3 to 5 years, iGens want to get into a job and they want to stay in that career for their entirety. They want to save for their retirement, get out, and be retired. So they are looking for more income insecurity and they are savers. So keep that in mind. iGens are very independent. They are extremely independent in that when they want to do something, that's when they're going to do it. So you can push and push and push, and you're going to get some pushback because until they're ready, they're not going to do something. Now, iGens, when they are ready, they're going to jump in with both feet and they're going to do whatever it is they do, and they're going to do it well. They'll do school well, they'll do work well, they'll save well. They'll whatever they jump into, they're going to do a great job. But it may take them a little while to get there. Here's what I like to suggest, especially to parents and grandparents, is if your iGen asks you for assistance, help them. Help them go to that doctor's appointment by themselves for the first time. When they say, Mom, will you still go with me? Go with them. Help them to feel comfortable in that environment by themselves. And then the next time they go, perhaps they'll go on their own. You've got to help them when they ask, but then step back and let them be independent from there. The next one is irreligious. Now, this one we just don't really know about yet. As they get a little older, this is where we're going to start seeing what's going to happen. So far, it appears that iGens are a little bit more spiritual generation, but they're not necessarily adhering to the traditional religions that the other generations have adhered to for many, many years. So this one's going to take a few more years for us to get some data on and report back on. And then the last I word is inclusive. This is probably the characteristic of this generation that moves me the most. And I love this generation. They are so creative and willing to try anything. Once they feel comfortable, they're so good at everything. But without a doubt, inclusiveness is the characteristic that is going to cause this generation to lead the remainder of the world where we need to be. Let me tell you what I mean by inclusive. This generation believes that people are people. This generation does not see skin color, they do not see culture, they do not see gender, they do not see age, they do not see anything that makes people different from others. It doesn't matter. People are people, and people deserve respect. Sometimes people want to tell me that people have to earn respect. Gen Z believes that everyone starts out with respect, and then it's up to you to lose respect. Everybody deserves to be respected, and they are extremely inclusive. This is the generation where we're going to see that it doesn't matter what the previous generations think about interracial marriages, or about immigration, or about what religion someone practices, or how someone votes. This is the generation that is going to say, oh, thank you for sharing your insight, your opinion, your background with me. Let me share mine with you now, and then let's see how we can work together. This is an inclusive generation. Now, this is going to make some of us in the older generations a little bit uncomfortable, because especially when it comes to gender identity issues, some of us are not quite sure what to think, what to say, what questions to ask, how to ask those questions in a polite, professional way. Here's what this generation will tell you. If you ask an iGen, how do I learn about these things so that I can be better educated and I can get along with people better? They're going to tell you, just ask questions. iGens love to educate us. And if you will just ask questions and be open to the responses, they will educate you all day long. So if there's anything that you feel uncomfortable about when it comes to inclusiveness, again, it could be race issues, it could be gender issues. If you're just not sure and you're just uncomfortable, find an iGen that you can feel comfortable with, open a line of communication with them, and just ask questions and listen to their answers. Be willing to accept their answers, and then be willing to move forward. Don't try to preach everything that you've grown up with and the way we've always done it. That's not the purpose here. It's not to preach all of that to them. You can share that information with them, but be open to what they have to share with you as well. If you do that, you will form lifelong relationships with iGens. And trust me, if they're going to be the ones who are leading our countries in a few years and who are the majority of the workforces in most nations, we need to make sure that we can get along with them. Now, just to kind of tie a nice bow around iGens, especially those coming into our work environments, what does the iGen work environment even look like a few years from now? So if they're currently ages 7 to 24, you probably already have a few of them on that upper range in your workplaces. You're going to have a lot more coming in over the next few years. Some things to keep in mind is they want that job security. So if you can offer jobs that have career security, not just job security, but career security, they can come in, they can learn, they can earn a decent salary, they can have benefits, they can have extra benefits like those safe spaces or those employee assistance programs, those counseling programs. Those are the kinds of things that they're going to be looking for, and that will attract them into your work environment. Also, keep in mind, they love to learn. So you'll want to ask them, what are things that you would like to know, that you would like to learn? And make sure that you are providing those training opportunities for them, but that you're providing the training opportunities that work for them. You can learn a lot from iGens if you will just ask them. They'll tell you. If you don't understand, ask them to educate you. And then put your training departments on making sure that you are providing what it is they need. Also, one other thing to keep in mind, two other things. One is that they do enjoy face-to-face communication, especially with their supervisors. So don't take anything I've said about them being, constantly on their cell phone, that they are completely isolated. They do like to have that face-to-face interaction. Many of them just don't know how to do that. So you're going to have to really work with them on communication skills and forming relationships. So once you do, then they're going to be right there and want to have that with you at all times. Then the last thing to keep in mind for any work environment with an iGen is that you have to stay ahead of technology in every type of job. Even if it's a type of job that you don't normally have technology in, you've got to make sure that you understand that an iGen will figure out some way to bring technology into that job. 50% of them spend more than 10 hours a day on their smart device doing whatever it is they're doing, shopping, dating, meeting new people, getting the news. They're instantly connected, learning something new. 50% of them spend 10 or more hours a day on their smart device. So you're going to have to make sure that your human resources departments have figured out how to handle that. Majority of the work is going to be done on a smart device. We're even going to see computers start to take a back seat to the smart devices. I've given you a really good graphic here on your screen to show you for iGens exactly how much they're spending, how much time they're spending each day on their smart device and what they're doing on their smart device. And so I encourage you to really keep an eye on technology and making sure that you are staying ahead of that technology in your work environment. Now, let me leave you with one last thought from Jean's book, and it is that iGeners or iGens, whichever you prefer, iGeners will learn to adapt to the reality of the workplace as they age, but the workplace will also adapt to them in still unknown ways. I am looking forward to continuing to do this workshop, but a year from now, 2 years from now, and 5 years from now, the information is definitely going to change.